If you enjoy hearing these eerie tales and want more to help you drift off or keep you up at night, don't forget to tap the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Never sleep in your car on a road trip. I'm from Connecticut. I was in a long-distance relationship with a girl from Georgia and would often make road trips down to visit her. I don't really mind. I love road trips. I've driven across the United States and back, all on my own. There's just something about traveling the highways of the US by yourself that's just so freeing. To save money, I would sleep in my car. It's not so bad. It's basically camping. In a metal tent. Makes you feel like you're really roughing it. I just recline the seat back, keep the key in the ignition just in case, and doze off. No, I don't put anything up to block the windows for privacy. Maybe I should have. The trip down south is a comfortable 2-day drive. My stop would usually be somewhere along the Virginia-North Carolina border. So, for my previous trip, that's exactly where I stopped that night. Rest stops were often less trafficked and thus quieter than truck stops. Normally I would have stopped at a Love's, but I was so tired that I settled for the first rest stop I saw. It was oddly vacant that night, with only a couple lone cars sitting forlorn under the amber street lamps, most likely travelers with the same idea as myself. I pulled into a parking spot away from the others, under the shadow of a tree and far from the street lamps. I figured I would have more privacy there as opposed to being bathed in light. So I did my usual thing, locked my doors, opened the window, just a hair for ventilation, kept my key in, reclined the seat, and went to sleep. I was never interrupted on any of these car camping nights, so I never suspected anything on this one. Then a sharp tap woke me up. At first, I thought I had heard it in my dream. I opened my eyes, a bit confused. Since I was leaned back, I was facing the ceiling and couldn't see anything. I hear another tap, like a tiny object hitting a hard surface. It came in an irregular rhythm. Was it raining? Was water dripping onto my windshield? I'm under a tree. Maybe something fell from the branches. Maybe a squirrel or a bird was dropped something. What if a squirrel was climbing around my car? Or what if it wasn't an animal? The thought occurred to me that it might very well be a person poking around outside. What did they want? Were the doors locked? Yes. The keys were in the ignition. I can leave in an instant. Still, I lay there, completely still, pretending to be asleep. Pretending I hadn't heard anything. Hoping whoever it was, they would leave me alone. It was better to not find out. I was too afraid to find out. It was better to stay here in blissful ignorance. Still the tapping continued. I had to do something. There was no way I was just going to stay there. I had to look. My heart was pounding. In that moment, it was deafeningly loud. Whoever was out there could probably hear it. I decided. I was going to look. I was going to raise my head up and see what was making the ew noise. So that's what I did. What met my eyes sent a jolt through entire body. Every muscle fiber locked up in pure shock at what I saw. The faint glow of the street lamps cast just enough light for me to make out what I was looking at. There in the windshield, staring directly at me, was a face. Someone, I presume to be a woman, was lying on my hood, her face pressed right up against my windshield. Her face was completely still, locked in a permanent grin. I froze in overwhelming terror. The eyes I stared into appeared to have rolled back, showing only the whites. The nose was turned up, pressed painfully into the glass. The lips stretched wide, revealing horrid rotten teeth. Even in the darkness, I could tell her skin was sickly pale, contrasting her long, filthy black hair. Whoever this was, she was clearly not in her right mind. I don't know how long I sat there, too afraid to move. Finally, I got a grip on myself and shot my hand to the ignition. It turned over, making, in that instant, the most beautiful sound I ever heard. For a split second, I was afraid I might be caught in a horror movie scenario, the one where the car won't crank as the killer approaches. I reversed as fast as I could, trying not to give this creeper time to try anything. In my panic, I remember activating the windshield wipers in a futile attempt to get her off. I thought, was I about to drive out of here with some wacko holding onto my hood? Thankfully, I didn't have to worry about that, because as soon as I stopped, the woman leapt off, landing on all fours. Seeing my opportunity, I shifted into drive and gunned it, right as I saw her reaching for the driver's side door. With my foot on the gas, I sped out of the parking lot. Behind me, I heard her let out a piercing shriek like that of an animal. I looked in my rearview mirror, and for a split second I thought I saw her chasing me, running on all fours, her black hair swinging wildly around her. I couldn't get a good look, as I rounded a curve in the road leading out of the rest stop and merged with the highway. There, I picked up speed and drove through the night. I did not dare stop again until I saw the morning light. My mom died suddenly about 4 months ago, but that wasn't the worst thing. My mom died quite suddenly and unexpectedly of a hospital infection about 4 months ago, but that, if you can believe it, wasn't the worst thing. Nor was the fact that her younger sister, my aunt, took up with Dad less than 2 months after her death. The worst was yet to come. It started on a dull evening. I just had supper with my aunt and Dad, barely tolerating her bright, friendly chatter about school. I went upstairs to my room as soon as I could to do my homework. I stared at my laptop screen, pretending to look at my assignment, but in reality I was swimming in grief and missing Mom. I couldn't concentrate on anything since she died. I minimized the assignment tab and looked at the photo I used as background. It was taken a few years ago, a happy family occasion, my mom and aunt sitting side by side, so like yet unlike. My dad next to Mom and I was leaning against him. All of us were smiling. Mom had both her arms stretched out around her sister and her husband. The chat box in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen began flashing. I was mildly surprised. It was an older app that no one really used anymore. I had been meaning to delete it, and then I froze. Mom's little image blinked in the chat box, and then the words popped up. "Hello, Thelma. It's me, Mom." Fear gripped my throat. I knew it must be some hacking thing or stupid error, but I was paralyzed. I turned round and glanced at my bedroom door. It was closed, although the sounds of TV from the living room still came wafting in. Aunt Claudia had the TV on whenever she was downstairs, even if she was not watching it. "Don't be scared, Thelma. It's really me. I found a way to talk to you, my darling, precious child. I've been missing you so much." If this was a hacker's joke, it was the cruelest joke in the world. Against my will, tears began welling in my eyes, spilling out. "Oh, my darling, please don't cry. It's okay. And it's no use crying anyway. I need you to save that energy." My fingers still stiff from fear, I managed to type out a response. "Mom? What do you mean? Is that you, Arlelli?" I could sense her familiar frustration rushing back through the laptop, same as when she felt I wasn't being smart or strong enough when she was alive. "Of course, Thelma. It's me. And I've come back to tell you something important." I had my own important news to share. "Did you know Aunt Claudia moved in last weekend?" "Yes, Thelma, I know. And this is what gave me the strength to come and tell you. Please be strong. I know you are a strong girl, and you can deal with this. I am sorry you have to. But you have to know. I have to tell you. She can't have everything. My life, man. House. Child." A different kind of fear took over me. "Mom, what do you mean?" "Thelma, I'm sorry to put this on you like this. I don't know what else to do. You have to know. Aunt Claudia murdered me." The bottom of my world gave way as I dropped into a dark hole of dread and fear. I felt as if I had known this all along, all through the past 4 months, ever since that awful night when Aunt Claudia called from the hospital, where she worked, to talk to Dad. I just couldn't say it. "Thelma? Are you listening to me?" If I had any doubts that the laptop chat was really my mom, those words dispelled them. I heard them in the exact voice she always used to say those very words to me. Yes, Mom. But how? She was at the hospital, you know, when I went in. She wasn't on my floor, but it was very easy for her to arrange for me to pick up an infection. Thelma? The door opened, and Aunt Claudia poked her head in. I gave a little scream and frantically minimized the chat box. Aunt Claudia stepped forward. Oh, honey, you look like you've seen a ghost. Are you okay? Wordlessly, I nodded. Aunt Claudia sighed. Thelma, sweetheart, I miss your mom too. But this moping isn't doing you any good. It's hurting your dad, you know. Do you want him to suffer more? I shrugged. I couldn't speak. I looked up at her. The light was odd on her face. She looked more like Mom than ever before, but also not. And these clothes, Thelma? She reached out and touched my black sleeve, and I flinched back as though she had hit me. She frowned, and for an instant I thought she was actually going to slap me. But then she smiled and said, I know girls your age like to wear black all over, but what do you say me and you have a trip to the mall and pick you up some nice new gear? On me. Come on, sweetheart. It will be so much fun. I shook my head furiously. Tears of rage, grief, and fear splatter out. Aunt Claudia began again. Oh, Thelma. But then she stopped and went quiet. I looked up at her face. She was pale and had a horrible expression. She was staring at my laptop. I followed her line of sight, turning around to look at my screen. The photo had changed. There was a new photo in background, showing Mom seemingly asleep in a hospital bed, and Aunt Claudia by her side, bent over her. Aunt Claudia seemed to jolt into life. Her face twisted into a terrible snarl. She screamed, Are you playing tricks on me? And she lunged towards me. I cringed back in my chair, raising my hands to defend myself against her onslaught. But before she could even touch me, a bolt of electricity sprang out of the laptop, hit her square in the chest, and she dropped dead to the floor. I shrieked in terror. Chon. Dad and I had to move from that town. Losing 2 wives in 4 months isn't a good look for anyone. Even though the police combed through our statements and the laptop and the electricity up and down, they eventually had to put it down to a freak accident which happened when I asked my aunt for help to get my laptop working. Dad never remarried, and I never heard from Mom again.